Hey, my friends, coming at you with another video tonight. Um, what I thought I would do in this video, and you've already realized that because you are watching it and it was in the title, is just share with you some lessons that I wish I'd learned earlier in my life as a reader, and that may hopefully inspire you to relax or just, chill or just, enjoy the process of learning and being a reader and just feeling more confident and just kinds of, I don't know, all wonderful superlative words that are, you know not coming to mind right now. Now, this is particularly about being a reader, like doing tarot readings for yourself and others. I don't talk about things like pathworking and meditation and esotericism and magic ritual, because I don't do that. That's not part of my MO. That's not part of how I work with cards. So just know that what I'm talking about in these sort of 11 tips or thoughts are really about the process of being a reader, and it's not about anything else. So I feel like that's useful to know out of the gate. Because sometimes I think people think, oh, I don't read that way. I don't do third party readings. I don't, read about health or whatever. That's totally fine. But I just want to share with you these experiences about being a reader that I've amassed over the last roughly 20 years and that I think can really be helpful to you. And as has been my trend lately, I have lots of notes. So let's just get into it, because why not? That's what we're here to do, not to listen to me not be able to find the word. So my first lesson that I wish I had learned is that it takes a while to get good. And what I mean by that is very, very few people are savants. Very few people pick up anything and are good at it right away. There are people who can do that. There are people who have perfect pitch. There are people who are immensely talented athletes out of the gate. There are people who are just innately good at everything immediately. Most of us are somewhere along the spectrum of needing practice and learning and experience in order to get good at something, and it doesn't happen overnight. I In many ways, it's kind of a weird thing that I managed to learn to read at all, because my tendency in life is to want to give up on things I'm not instantly good at. And I don't know, I think that there's evidence that I had some kind of predilection for this kind of work because I didn't give up. But it wasn't easy, and I wasn't, I wasn't good right away. In fact, I don't think I was really good until probably around the time I started this channel. And that was at a moment where I felt like I had enough confidence to share anything with anybody, but that was not that long ago. And it was even more into the future before I started accepting money for readings. So, what I excuse me, I'm recovering from a cold. So what I want to just encourage people to do is just remember that being anything worth doing generally is not something that you're good at overnight, and that it's okay to not be flawless overnight. It's okay to take time. We live in a very instant gratification world, and I started reading 20 years ago, like I said, and that's not like, oh, I started reading 20 years ago. It's like I started reading 20 years ago, and even then there was a very instant gratification quality to the world, and I think it's gotten more intense in the 20 years since I started, and straight up, like, one of the pieces of advice I remember someone once telling me when I was like new to this, in fact, and was like, yeah, I've been reading for like a year or two and I'm ready to like teach. And they were like, yeah, there's no expert like a novice. And it really stung because I knew immediately what they meant, which was like, you think you know everything, but you don't. And you're still new. Like, you are not an expert after a year or two. And I know that there are folks who are watching this right now who are like probably ready to turn me off. because they've only been reading for a year or two. Like, you don't have to be an expert right away. And it doesn't even mean you have to be good or that you're not good at that point. You might be really good after a couple years. But in no profession does anyone sort of get a year or two under their belt and say, yep, I'm a PhD in this. And that's not necessarily the goal. And I'm reaching for analogies here that maybe are a little incongruent, but the point is, it's different for everybody, but most people are not good overnight. And that's okay. It really is okay. You can still have a YouTube channel. You can still have an Instagram. You can still do meetups with friends and even teach friends. You learn a lot by teaching. But I think it's important to recognize that, like, it's not, you don't just lay out the cards the first day and you're Rachel Pollack. It took Rachel Pollack a long time before Rachel Pollack was Rachel Pollack, for example. And so that leads kind of into my second lesson, and something I struggled with a whole lot in many aspects of my life, which is that it's okay to be a student. And it's fun to be a student. Like, learning new things, experimenting, that's delicious. That's tasty. It's so much fun. I can say that now, and I don't always remember it. And partly what taught me that was going to grad school for something obviously completely else. We don't have MFAs in tarot. But my grad program was a sandbox of experimentation and playing with language and writing. And I loved it because I didn't have to prove myself all the time. I didn't have to treat everything like an audition, which I did for so many years with everything. I talk about my writing sometimes on this channel. I started in theater as an actor, and I took every experience I had and treated it like it was an audition, hoping that I would win someone over and prove myself. It doesn't work that way. And I would spend money on classes and I wouldn't learn anything because I was spending the whole time stressing out about trying to impress everybody. That's not how you learn. Learning should be fun. Learning should be messy. Learning should be enjoyable. It should be playful. It should be like getting in the sandbox. It should be like making mud pies. It should be satisfying and sexy and fun. And there is nothing wrong with being a student. There's nothing to be embarrassed about being a student. There's nothing wrong with saying, I'm new to this, but I love it. And I think I'm kind of good at it. And I'm probably like a couple years away from like being a pro. And like there's this whole thing in the world, and like so much of the world is about being like a pro or an amateur. Garbage. It doesn't matter. I've said this before, and I made a video about charging for readings and going pro. There are plenty of people out there who are charging for readings who have no business doing it. Be a student, enjoy it. Let yourself relax into this thing so that it just, it's I get so passionate about it, partly because I have failed at that so many times in life, which is partly what this video is about, is kind of helping you learn from my experience. It's okay to be new at something. It's okay to be a student. That is not something to be ashamed of. You never should be embarrassed by saying I have more to learn. And I do not trust most folks who think that they are done learning. I just don't. I think humbleness, which is different than self-effacement, is really important. Just being humble to say, I could learn from that person. I don't watch YouTube videos only of people who have been reading longer than me. I've learned a lot from people who I could be their father age-wise. You know what I mean? There are people who come into my life. I have friends who are brilliant readers who are super young, and they started super young, and they've taught me things. And I would have missed out on that opportunity if I've been reading for 20 years, I have nothing left to learn. I'm still a student. I'm just a student who's been reading long enough and feels confident enough in their ability to say, my time is worthwhile, and if you would like me to read for you, that's going to have a financial cost associated with it, because I have this experience and because I have limited time. And that's really why I charge for readings. That's not why everyone does it, but that's where I am. But I would be so much less of a reader if I gave up on learning. I still consider myself a student as much as I consider myself a teacher and a mentor to folks who I chat with and who comment here and or who message me on Instagram. I, for a while, was offering like professional coaching, and I was working with someone who was like a much more effortless reader than I probably could ever hope to be. And I learned from them. And ultimately I realized like I would start to beat myself up and say, this person's paying me to coach them and they should be having others pay them to coach. And I realized that what my responsibility was as a coach in that situation was not to teach them anything, but to buck them up and make them see their true talent, which is sometimes what a mentor does. Enjoy learning. Just enjoy it. There's no deadline. There's no finish line. There's no moment where you have to like pass the test and prove your worth as a reader. You get to be a student for as long as you want. If I could get paid to go to school and get master's degrees and stuff, if that could be my job, I would do it in a heartbeat because it's fun. So this is particularly directed at folks who are relatively new. Enjoy the learning, enjoy the discovery. You know, we love the Fool card in tarot, and partly because it represents that sense of openness to discovery. You know, I've heard the card described as impulse. This isn't quite right, but it's like impulse in search of experience or something like that. That's wrong. But the point is that like we sort of look up to the Fool card in tarot as this impulse of joy and openness and freedom. But we don't let ourselves experience that journey as students because there's such a rush to brand ourselves as pros or to brand ourselves as experts. And that comes with time and it comes with ego. And I don't like saying one of the hardest parts of starting this channel was like the idea that I had something about me that made what I was saying worthwhile. And I felt like, who am I? Like, I'm nobody. I've never done anything when I started this channel, you know, and no one was watching the videos. And I'm not even a good marketer. Like, I'm not a good social media brand. But what I discovered was that if I just shared my experiences and my thoughts with folks who were interested, they might learn something they hadn't thought of. So it's not about me being an expert. It's about me having a unique experience and sharing that with folks. This is kind of a convoluted thing, but I guess I'm just saying that because I don't want you to think that I think about myself as a guru or someone who's like super smart about this stuff. I'm someone who has X amount of years of experience and has learned X amount of things about life and is telling you what I wish I had done differently. And one of the things I wish I had done differently was enjoy the process of learning and discovering and being a student and not feeling pulled to pressurize myself to be a pro in a world where like, who gets to make that decision anyway? I know brilliant readers who have not charged a dime. And I've said this before. I've gotten, not in recent years, because since I started this channel probably, because I got more selective, but I have had readings in the past, especially in my early days, where I do feel like I paid for something and I wasn't working with a pro. They were just someone who was brave enough to ask me for money. So I hope that makes sense. I'm also going to stop like second guessing what I'm telling you in the fear of offending somebody. Like if you take what I'm saying as hurtful or offensive, I hope that you understand that this comes from a place of being 40 and having lived a little bit. So the next part of that really is just a kind of sub-bullet, which is like, even when being a student isn't fun, you should still try to enjoy it. Like there are times where being a student kind of sucks and you don't feel confident and you don't feel like you'll ever get there and you plateau and you just feel like you're spinning your wheels. And something's happening when that's happening. Usually what's happening is that you kind of need to step back and let everything you've learned like internalize and fertilize and blossom. So don't throw in the towel. Don't get pissed off at yourself like I did. I mean, I was so hard on myself when I gave a bad reading, or when I didn't know, or I just didn't know and I felt like I hadn't internalized anything. And that kind of self-flagellation is really not conducive to learning. So even when it's rough, still try to enjoy the process of being a student. And when you have a rough moment, remember that it'll get better. You're just in that phase of needing to internalize, and maybe you need a break. The other day, a friend of mine said, tell me something cool tarot related that you did today or this week. And I'm like, I haven't thought about tarot in about 3 days. And that's fine. That's good. You know what I mean? It's good to rest. It's good to take days off. These are vessels that put out and take in, and sometimes we need to rest. Sometimes we need to absorb and consume and be filled. And then we get to put out again. Probably should put out. All right. 3. I have said this many times before. If you are convinced that daily draws are a great learning tool for you or a great practice for you, but at the same time you're feeling frustrated by the experience, I would say it's probably not you that's the issue. Daily draws need some kind of bounding box to make them have a point. And so if you are going to do a daily draw of any kind, have some kind of context. We'll talk more about context, of course. That makes it make sense. Like, say, I'm going to draw a card today in the morning, and then at night before I go to bed, I'm going to think of all of the experiences that I had that could have been represented by this card. Not what's the one thing that this card depicted today, because I find that doesn't usually resonate. But if you give yourself the thing of like, today, I'm going to try to notice every way the Four of Swords shows up in my life and journal about it. And in that way, as a learning tool, you start to experience Four of Swordsy moments in more than just a cliche of what that card seems to mean because you read it in a book. I'll talk more about what I just said later. Or give yourself a question like, what is an opportunity for me today? And then don't just draw the card and say, okay, it's the Four of Swords. I need to like find times to rest. Take that card and say, okay, what's my opportunity today, Four of Swords? Like, come up with an actual practical, doable, performable opportunity or objective for you to do, and then do it. I mean, I think what gets people so stuck with daily draws when I'm sort of lurking in forums and chat rooms or whatnot is that they're like, I pulled this card today and like I got to the end of the day and nothing like this happened. Because we get it in our heads that like the Four of Swords represents this one experience of stillness and quiet. But that could have manifested in about 100 ways over the course of a day. And so daily draws for me are very, very difficult as a learning tool unless you have some kind of bounding box, some kind of boundary, some kind of context, unless you have a very specific question and you use it in a specific way. These are things I've said before, so I won't belabor it, but I really, really struggled in my time of learning or starting out with daily draws because they just never made sense, ever. And I was like, I'm bad at this. And it had the reverse effect. It didn't build confidence. It didn't help me understand the cards. It made me feel like shit. And that's not, again, a good way to learn. So if you're doing the daily draw as a student, give yourself some kind of context. And I would really recommend using 3 cards instead of 1, but that's just me. Number 4, you will always keep evolving. And this kind of ties back into the first 2 points. Where you are right now is not where you're going, it's where you're coming from. And when you're open to that, and when you recognize that you may watch a video like this, or you may read a book or a blog or see a post, and you will say, ugh, that's wrong, that's not how you read, that's not tarot, or I don't like that, I don't read Marseille, I don't like Thoth. You know, that's where you're at right now. But just know that in 5-10 years, maybe Thoth becomes your system of choice. Maybe you love Marseille. Like, that's something I was so like with pip decks for so much of my reading life, and then like that turned out to be the thing that actually unlocked my confidence and I think my talent as a reader, and that completely revolutionized the way that I read for the better. And it was because I accepted the call of something that up until that point I had been really biased against. So just know, you know what I mean? Like, where you are now is not where you're going. No, it's not where you're going, it's where you're coming from. So you're going to keep changing. Your view of the cards is probably going to keep changing. You'll probably evolve. There may be times where you're like, this stuff sucks and I don't like it anymore. I'm going to take a break. All of that is fine. You will not stay the same. And part of the thing about getting readings or doing readings is to not stay the same, is to be more proactive, is to engage in the world in a different way. So, like, just know that where you are now is where you are now. It's not where you will always be as a reader. And that is forever, however many years you've been reading. I kind of alluded to this already. Like, if you're going to read, if you're going to go through the process of reading, have a question and make it good. I really, 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 really think that readers constrict their ability sometimes by just throwing some cards without context, without a question. Have a question. Spend some time with the question. We have this tool that helps us discover answers to things that are hard to figure out. So why not spend the time figuring out what it is we really want to know? Like, there are times where you're just playing, and that's fine. But if you're going to do a reading for yourself or for anyone, like, have a good question. Why not? You know, why not? Why not start viewing the exploration of your question, especially if you're reading for yourself, as part of the process of reading? You know, it's not just like, let me get to the, it's like the question is the foreplay, and the reading is the climax. But the climax isn't the only part of it. And in fact, if you go right to the climax, like, people are not going to want to hook up with you again. You know, like, talk to your, excuse me. Whew, I made myself choke. Talk to yourself about the question. If you're reading for someone face to face, explore the question with them. Say, okay, here's how I'm understanding the question. Is that what you really want to know? Or is, like, am I misunderstanding that? And if you are doing that, approach it from a place of humbleness. Not like your question is bad or wrong, but like, okay, this is the kind you want to know if your boyfriend is seeing someone else. Okay, so what I hear is that you're worried that your boyfriend might be unfaithful, and you want a reading that's going to tell you yes or no. Is that true? You know, am I understanding you correctly? And then that puts the person you're reading for in the position to actually reevaluate without feeling threatened by you saying, I can't do that kind of reading. That's a bad question. You know, is this the answer that you're looking for? It allows them to ask themselves, is that really the answer I want to know? And they may say, oh, no, I don't know if I want to know that. Or they may say, yes, that is the answer that I want. Great. You know, I think spending time with the question, massaging the question, understanding what it is you really want to know, your readings will be better, and you'll be more confident, and it will be easier to get a good answer, because you'll know what you're working toward. So I really, really would say, like, if you're reading for yourself, or you're doing like a quick 3-card reading for a friend, you should spend at least the amount of time on the question as you would spend on the reading. And if it's like just a quick reading, 2 or 3 times as much time on the question. Know what you want to know, and like, take it apart and hold it and say, is this the answer? Is this the question I'm looking for? Is this going to give me the answer that I want? And then I've talked about this a lot too. Like, make sure your spread actually answers the question, but that's not part of our discussion tonight. I will repeat my mantra for number 6, which is that context is everything. Nothing in tarot means anything without context. And so I'm going to kind of like combine 6 and 7 here. So nothing means anything without context. I'm trying to sort of rephrase something I've said a lot, which is a phrase I borrowed from Camellia Elias, which is that the cards don't mean anything. And when I say that, that makes a lot of people tense up. What that means to me is that the cards are the beginning of the conversation. What the cards mean, what we've learned, our keywords, our phrases, what the pictures are, whatever associations we have, that is the jumping off point for a reading. That is the foundation and the skeleton of the house. You know, if you think about the way a house is constructed, it's built with a foundation and then a skeleton comes in, a frame, it's called. And then comes the drywall, and then comes the windows, and then comes the paint and the curtains and the tiles and the carpets. But if you don't have the foundation and the frame, the house won't stand. The meaning of the card that we've learned is the foundation. That is the frame. That's where we're starting. Some readers, myself included, do not, and again, I've evolved past this because I was struggling. It takes a while for us to move past the idea of meaning as central. So this is my tip 7, which is that most of us, not all of us, most of us learn a meaning-centric approach to card reading. And that is where that's a good start. That's how we get our foundation. But doing a tarot reading, and again, I'm not talking about meditation, path working, spiritual or spell work. I'm talking about slinging cards to get answers. Tarot, or any divination tool, is question-centric, or at least querent-centric. And what I mean by that is when we pick up a book, when we pick up Weight, you know, and we look up the meaning of the Four of Swords. So we learn vigilance, retreat, solitude, exile, tomb, and coffin. That is the starting place. That is the foundation. Most of us will learn a method of tarot reading where, and again, when I say most of us, it's like I have to qualify that because I don't know. But most people I know have had this experience. You come to me for a reading and you want to know about your love life. And you want to know if your boyfriend's cheating on you. And I say, the Four of Swords has showed up. And that means you need rest. That is a meaning-centric approach, which means that I have put the meaning of the card in front of your question. And in this case, I've negated your question because I didn't answer it. A question-centric or querent-centric approach means that I have to answer the damn question no matter what card comes up, which means I have to start with the Four of Swords as rest, for example, and then figure out how to answer the question with the meaning of that card. So I have to bend and pull and stretch the card meaning in order to get to that answer. And sometimes that is scary. Sometimes it takes some effort, but it's actually not that hard when you start thinking that way. But so many of us learn the Four of Swords means rest, and that's it. And that's where a lot of readings stop. And that's, to me, I think one thing that I will tell you, if you want to measure your progress as a reader, that to me is a barometer of how advanced you might be. That if you are asked a question and you get a card that doesn't seem to answer it, and you tell whoever you're reading for, including yourself, if that's you, that question is wrong. The card means this. To me, you have more work to do. We all do, but that to me is a measure of like whether you're moving towards being an advanced reader or not. And I hate these terms. They're just the language that we have. In a meaning centric approach, I tell you, you need rest. Stop thinking about that. In a question centric or querent centric approach, I would say Four of Swords. Four of Swords means rest, repose, quiet. What does that suggest? They should rest? Why would they rest? They should rest because they don't have to worry about it because their partner's not cheating on them. So you don't have to worry. You can rest. You're not being cheated on. Do you see how that little train of thought took me from my foundation all the way to the answer to the question? That's where we put the meaning of that's where we put the question or the querent above the meaning, and we let the meaning support us. That's the foundation. That's where I was starting from. But I have to take a journey to answer the question. And that was just off the top of my head. Like, this is not rocket surgery, as the joke goes. You can do this. It's just that most readers, in my experience, stop at the meaning. And that is fundamental. That's like the fundamental. Four of Swords is rest, for example. The cards drawn always answer the question. They always do. 99.9% of the time. So I guess like not always, but like 99%. You may have a reading once in a while where you will know without certainty that this reading is saying, whoa, you got to pay attention to this thing. But that has happened to me maybe once or twice in 20 years. Some readers have that experience more. Some people are more psychic than others. I don't know. But I will tell you that one of the things as a tarot reader that I hold to be true is that the cards drawn always answer the question that was asked. Because what we're doing, I think, as a reader is we're building a translation tool with divinity or the universe or psychology or however you want to think about it. We're saying let's just use our higher selves as like a nebulous and non-denominational term. We can't talk to our higher selves because God or whatever that is doesn't speak English and we don't speak Godlish or whatever. We don't have a shared language. What we have are divination tools. And we say to the higher being, God, our higher selves, whatever, here's a language. Here's how I interpret this language. Will you agree to speak this language with me? And because the higher being, the higher self, whatever, is far more adept at everything than we are, they agree to say, yes, I will interpret that with you. But in order for that to work, you have to have a language, a system, a shared agreement, in order to be able to converse together. That to me is kind of what a reading is. But unlike a language, it's not a series of conjugations. It takes some teasing. It's a little bit more like you almost speak the same language or you're learning a shared language with the higher self. And so you have to kind of work a little harder. And sometimes there are going to be days where the readings come and the language happens and the conversation flows. And there are going to be sometimes when it's harder, just like communicating with anybody. There are days where you will be talking to your partner or your kids or your parents, and they will understand everything you're saying. And there'll be other days where it's like you cannot say anything right. And it feels like you're speaking another language. It's the same. Kind of got off on a tangent there. Question-centric, I really encourage you to start thinking about the question or the querent as central to the reading rather than the meaning of the card. And it took me a really, really long time to do that. And I told so many people, so embarrassing when I think about it, your question isn't wrong. I mean, I didn't say it that way. But I was like, Eight of Swords, that's not what you want to know. You want to know this. All right, number 8. We're moving along. When you're reading for others, it's not about you. I mean this in many ways. I mean, you don't have to impress them. You don't have to astonish them or dazzle them. You don't have to teach them. You just have to answer their question and focus on them and work with them. How, whether you're like a collaborative reader or whatever, it's about them. And I also mean that in the sense where like When you get nervous, I talked about this in the what to do when you get nervous video. When you get nervous, when you start to feel like you're going to fail, when you feel like you're going to fuck up, that's you centering yourself in the process. So decentralize yourself, center yourself on the querent and the question. And if the querent is you and you're reading for yourself, it's hard for you to like center yourself or decenter yourself for yourself, but you can center yourself around the question that you've asked, which is one reason why I think when you're reading for yourself, having a question is really useful. Because if nothing else, when you are focused on the question, it's harder to be focused on your ego, your fears, your anxieties, etc. But don't worry about impressing. Don't worry about dazzling. Don't worry about appearing psychic or appearing magical, or just answer the question with the cards on the table and like let yourself off the hook of being impressive and just do the reading. It's about them. And if you are the querent reading for yourself, it's about your question. It's not about proving yourself to yourself. It's not about dazzling yourself. It's about answering the question. Focus on the question. That was dumb. I don't know why I did that. All systems are valid, and I don't think it matters what system you use, but it matters that you have one. And this kind of ties into stuff I've already said. I will occasionally get comments on my channel, or I'll see in forums online, that system is wrong, or that system is bad, or you're doing it wrong, or that's not how you read Rider-Waite-Smith, or Thoth is the real system, or if you want to be a real tarot reader, you have to read Marseille the way that Jodorowsky taught it, or whoever. I don't think any of that is true. I think you will find yourself drawn as a reader to a particular system primarily. For most of us, it's Rider-Waite-Smith, and then there's maybe, like 15, 20% who are like real Thoth devotees, and then there's this increasing interest in Marseille style reading. It doesn't matter, and it doesn't matter if you're reading the Rider-Waite-Smith, for example, through a Golden Dawn lens, or a completely secular lens, or whatever. It just matters that you have that foundation to build on that we talked about earlier. All the systems are valid, but I do think you have to learn some form of system in order to be able to justify to yourself and whoever you're reading for, if you do read for others, why you came up with what you did. I think that tarot is like math in the sense that you want to be able to show your work if you have to. I think being able to show your work, particularly to yourself, to say, here's how I got to that answer, and here's how I can justify having given that answer, is maybe the only way to really judge whether or not your reading was good. Because everything else is so dependent on outside factors. Yes, I also think that you can learn other systems as you go along, as I have done, as many people do. So you can learn the Rider-Waite-Smith system, and then learn Thoth, and they will inform each other. Marseille and Rider-Waite-Smith, to me, work together so seamlessly, because I have gotten both of them in my muscles. And so when I need Rider-Waite-Smith, it's there for me, and when I need Marseille, it's there for me. Don't read with Thoth, because I don't like keywords. But keywords are just another form of Pamela Coleman Smith's pictures. So that's just a personal preference. And that's another thing, right? Like, keywords are a system. Pamela Coleman Smith's drawings are a system. Pamela Coleman Smith's drawings are actually pictures of the keywords on the Thoth cards. If you sit down with the Rider-Waite-Smith pips and the Thoth pips, and you look at the keyword and you look at Pam's drawing, you will see that she was drawing that keyword, because they are the keywords that came from the Golden Dawn. So those are both different versions of the system. I prefer the picture to play with because I'm a very literal and linguistic and language-oriented person. And so when I see the keyword, I can't see anything else. But because I'm not a super visual thinker, I can look past the picture. That's a system that I have developed over time, though. So I do think you have to learn something. You do have to have a foundation. I think, pardon me for saying this, I think that there are some, maybe not you if you're this kind of person, but some folks who start as tarot readers and maybe do some good readings and think, I don't have anything to learn. I'm an intuitive reader. I think that that's okay. I think that that's where, again, where you start. But having a foundation, having something to build on, having something to fall back on, and having something to prove your answers to yourself is going to make you more confident over time. It's going to make you feel more certain. It's going to allow you to be able to say to a skeptic, here's how I arrived there. Some people really can lay out the cards for the first time and just know. But I don't think that many of us can. I don't think that the world is full of savants. I think genius is occasional. I think it's the exception, not the rule. And so even if you're a really good reader who doesn't have a system, I think you might feel more confident if you codify at least what you have learned from reading intuitively. So if you create your own system that explains your impulses and your techniques, then you have that to be able to say, I interpret this card this way because, if anyone ever asks, or if you start to doubt yourself. I think a foundation is really, really key. I really do. Just to be like totally blunt, to go back to this idea of like instant gratification, a lot of us want to feel like experts right away. And so we want to bypass all the learning. And so a lot of folks, and I have been guilty of this too, so I'm not trying to come out like I'm better than anybody. A lot of us try to justify our desire to like get through the learning and be experts and just jump to the end. But as the first few lessons that I've learned hopefully have provided you with insight into, that is an incredible waste of the joy of learning. So, don't do that. Coming down to the wire here. Number 10. What did I write here? Oh, this is going to be a little touchy too, as I do. Iconoclastic thoughts. Here's what. All the esoteric stuff, all the Kabbalah, all the astrology, all the whatevers, the woo-woo stuff that has been placed onto tarot means nothing if it gets in the way of the answer that the reading is trying to give you. And so what I mean by that is if you are giving a reading to yourself or someone else, and you are explaining the energetic associations of the Hebrew letter associated with this card, its path on the tree of life, its astrological associations, its numerological associations, its Kabbalistic resonances, you are giving the person you're reading for, who may be you, who may be someone else, a lot of information that is not answering their question, unless you are tying those associations to the question. So, I believe, and this is not always the case, but I believe that when we sit down for a tarot reading to answer a question, and again, I'm not talking about path working, meditation, psychological exploration, I'm not talking about any of that. I'm talking about card slinging, straight up fortune telling, or just divination. People want an answer to the question. They don't, and I think that includes you. We don't want a history of the Golden Dawn, of the tarot, of astrology, of the version of astrology that has been shoehorned onto tarot. Like, people just want an answer. You just want an answer. All of that stuff is interesting. All of that stuff is fascinating if it is helping you get an answer that makes sense. If it's getting in the way, if it's giving you more to talk about without actually getting you closer to the answer, let it go. It's all in there in you. If you've learned it and you know it, it's going to be there when you need it. But it doesn't need to be explained all the time. And I say this because when I started as a reader and I started reading for others on the free tarot networks through the ATA, I approached being a reader as though everyone who was coming to me wanted my expertise on everything, including the system of tarot. And they didn't. They were people who found this site on the internet. And this might sound bitchy, but they were the kind of people who wanted a tarot reading for free. Which is, there's nothing wrong with that, but that's a very specific kind of client that you're working with. That is someone who's like, I want an answer now and I don't want to pay for it. And you could see it in the questions that we got asked back then. They didn't care about the Kabbalah. They cared about whether or not their partner was cheating. They cared about whether or not they were going to get the job. That's what they wanted to know. And I got a lot of bad feedback from people who I didn't help because I never answered their question, or I did answer their question, but only after 5 single-spaced pages of esoteric gobbledygook that had nothing to do with what they were asking. And you can see how passionate I'm getting about this because I really do believe that in life sometimes we just want answers. And as readers, I think we have to think about that, even if it's us. Sometimes as folks who are interested in this stuff, it's like we can get so caught up in the words. We can get so caught up in the ritual of it, or the everything there is to know. Like the potential, the fullness, the expanse of all of this stuff. But when we sat down originally, we just wanted to know what to have for dinner that night. We just wanted to know how to handle the thing with our boss. And we put ourselves through this exercise of like, okay, this is associated with Leo, and Leo is about like ego and fire. It's a fire sign. It's fixed fire. It's on this path on the tree of life, which is associated, and like, but the card is just strength. And it's like, you just gotta be strong, man. You just gotta like, hold your ground, but do it in a gentle way. Like sometimes the answer is right there and we get so clouded with stuff. So I guess what I'm saying here is I'm giving you permission to not have to reiterate everything you know about a card and its history and its associations to answer a question, whether it's for you or for someone else or whatevs. All of that stuff is only beneficial in a reading if it serves the question, because remember, we're looking at question-centric reading in this kind of tarot. All of those associations are helpful in path working, in spell work, in ritual magic. All of those things are useful at that point. Another thing I'll add to this too, if it makes you feel better, is if you are reading with Rider-Waite-Smith or Thoth, all of those associations are depicted in the card. So, for example, with the Emperor being associated with Aries, you get the Aries-ness in the whole Emperor-ness of Pamela Coleman Smith's image. That stone block, those impenetrable mountains, the thin river. All of that is its Aries-ness in the art. And it's in Thoth too, you just have to sort of relax into the kind of art that it is. Those keywords, those drawings, those are all depictions of the associations that the Golden Dawn put into it. And so whether you're reading intuitively and just throwing the cards and saying that Four of Swords looks like this, or you're studying the esoteric titles and the associations, it's actually in there because Pamela Coleman Smith synthesized all of those things. The Golden Dawn synthesized all those things into their esoteric titles, and then Pamela Coleman Smith took all of that and the esoteric titles and she drew them. And so you're kind of working with those systems already anyway, without even knowing it. Tarot is, if you think about what Waite was saying about tarot, was that it contained all of these multitudes. And so to give Waite a little bit of credit for his deck and Pamela Coleman Smith's deck, they put all that in there for you. And they made this cheat sheet. And tarot is, if you think about like tarot as this book of wisdom, I will give Waite credit, and Lady Frida Harris and Crowley, I'm pointing because the deck's over there, they did all that work for you. You know what I mean? They gave you the book. You just have to read it. So you don't have to like go in and like freak out about all those associations because they're there in the art. Finally, are we ready yet? This is a long video. I wonder how many people actually get to the end of these. I don't care. Hopefully it helps somebody. Oh, the more someone is telling you that you're doing it wrong, and I mean this one-on-one, the more likely they're afraid they're doing it wrong. And I don't mean you go to a channel like this one or a book or whatever, and they say things you don't agree with. I mean that you're having a conversation with someone, you're in an online group, you're at a meetup, and someone is like, no, that's not how you do it. No, that system's wrong. The more insecure somebody is, the more likely they are to push your buttons and try to convince you that they are right. Because if they can do that, then they feel better about themselves. They feel better about their system. Their doubts are squelched because they managed to crush your way and make your way, their way, your way. They won. So do not let that fuck with you. If you are doing the work, if you are, whatever system you're using, if you could be the most intuitive reader, as long as you can justify why you're doing what you're doing, if you're studying and you're taking it seriously and you're enjoying being a student, fuck what anyone else says about how you should be doing it or what's right and valid and what's not. I not as much as I used to, but I used to get comments on this channel all the time about, you're wrong, you didn't know what you're talking about. That's not how this is done. Garbage. What I did was I triggered someone and I triggered their insecurity, and they didn't like that because I said something they didn't agree with. And so their response to that is to say to me, you're wrong and stupid and dumb and fuck you. And my response to them is, figure it out, because I ain't wrong. Not for me. And I can only talk from my system and my experience because that is what I have spent the last 20 years developing. So whatever path you're on is the right path. If you're enjoying it, if you're doing the work, if you're practicing and putting the querent or the question ahead of the meaning, if you're playing in the sandbox, if you're doing all that stuff, it doesn't matter how you're getting there. And where you are right now is not where you're going, it's where you're coming from. So when anyone comes along and tells you you're doing it wrong, say, frankly, say, I don't need your bad energy in my life. Get the fuck away from me. I mean, honestly, it's so rude. People get so confident in telling other people that they're wrong. It's so amazing. Everything I say on this channel is just my experience. But I hope and have learned that it resonates with some people and not with others. And that's fine. Because I cannot be everything to everybody, and neither can you. And as a learner, as a reader, as a student, as a pro, as whatever you are watching this video, when one person is triggered by your method and they tell you you're wrong, that's about them. It's not about you. You keep on the path you're working on. You take what you want from videos like this. You take what you want from the great books, from the blogs. Not everything that I say is even... I go back and look at videos and I'm like, I don't believe that anymore because I've changed. You know what I mean? Like, you just take the things that feel right. And then sometimes you'll take something that doesn't feel right. And you're like, why don't I like that? Maybe I should try it. Or no, I don't like that. Pleh. You know what I mean? You just gather along the way and you choose the things and you put them in your toolbox. And you might not use them all the time. But then sometimes you'll be stuck and you'll say, what about this thing that I learned? That asshole Tom Benjamin said. Let me try it. And then it kind of worked. And you're like, oh, maybe that guy's not so much of an asshole after all. Or maybe it just worked that one time and you're never going to use that tool again, but it was the key that you needed at that moment to unlock the reading. And that is fine. Your path is the right path if you are doing things generously, if you're enjoying it, if you're, I'm just repeating the same things over and over again. These are all things that I wish someone had told me 20 years ago when I started this. And I'm sharing them with you now. And not every one of them will resonate. I will say this, if there's one thing, there's only one of these that you take away, it's question-centric reading. Please, don't tell people that the cards can't answer their question. It just doesn't work that way. If tarot works, it works. That's why this is so important to me. I am the variable in a reading. If I cannot figure out how the card connects to the answer, it's not the question or the card that's bad most of the time. It might be the question that's bad, but it's usually me. Because, again, even if the question isn't great, that card is going to answer that question because that is the deal we made when we shuffled the cards. Shuffling the cards is an agreement between us and that whatever being we talked about earlier and the cards to say, here is the question. When I shuffle these cards, you are going to give me the cards that answer that question. That's the pact. And in order for this to make sense to me, I have to believe that the cards and the whatever being are holding up their end of the bargain. And that when I can't figure it out, the variable is me. And that I am the one that needs to work harder. Because I am the only active element in the process. I am the only sentient being engaged. I am the mouth at that moment. I am the person who is the conduit or the filter for the answer. And if they're not gelling, something isn't gelling in me, and I have to figure it out. And there are times where I just can't, because I'm human. But I really do believe that question-centric approach to reading is big, big, big. And I'm going to be talking more about that. In fact, I'm working on a new book, and it is a central theme of it. I'm going to shut up now. I hope this was helpful. Have a good week. Be good.